Well, hi there folks, it's Matt Hayson here looking at this week's property market, and plenty going down. In fact, it was a huge week of auctions across the Sydney market last week. But before I get into the data, I just want to let you know that I always look at the resource of SQM Research when it comes to looking at auction data. They are by far the most accurate when it comes to looking at that particular data. Forget domain, forget realestate.com, SQM Research are bang on and as close to accurate as you will find. So let's get into it. Last week, 1,378 properties were due to go under the hammer across Sydney for an overall clearance rate sitting at 61.8%. Now, this might come as very interesting news that just 28% of those 1,378 properties that were due to go under the hammer actually sold at auction, or what we'd call under the hammer. But let's look at the corresponding week closing out November 8 in 2020, where just 942 properties went under the hammer for an overall clearance rate sitting at 60%. So very similar to what we're seeing this year. And what sold under the hammer? Just 30% of properties as well. So what are we learning from this auction market? Well, I can tell you this. The auction market peaked on September 19 with the clearance rate sitting at 71%. Now, since that point, we've seen a very sharp rise in the number of properties coming onto the market. In fact, it was 49% higher in the number of properties going under the hammer last week as compared to the corresponding weekend in 2020. So as we've seen that sharp rise in the number of properties coming onto the market, we're also starting to see the auction clearance rate decline. It's down 13% last weekend compared to the peak on September 19. So boiling all of these down, what does it mean if you're a buyer? Well, I can tell you this, there's some very interesting metrics starting to develop. Right now, with that sharp rise in the number of properties coming onto the market, that means there's a great selection of property opportunities available for you. But there's also a declining auction clearance rate, which means there's less demand and competition for you to compete to buy those properties. But here's the interesting thing that I'm looking at the moment. Right now, the bank narrative is that property prices are going to modestly increase next year between 5 and 7%. Now, while that narrative is in play, that means that banks are more open and fluid around lending money to their borrowers. And also, bank valuations are also positive, knowing that property prices are likely to increase into next year. So that helps the buying process immensely. However, at some point, that narrative will change. Now, that might very well be later next year with rising interest rates and potentially banks looking at the next cycle being that asset prices may decline. Now, when that happens, buying a property becomes far more complicated. So in our view right now, when you've got great supply, falling demand, and you can still lock in a historic low interest rate, that is as good as buying opportunities will get. Now, speaking of wonderful buying opportunities, we've just listed 1A Tilbury Avenue in Balmain. It's the first waterfront property that's come to market in Balmain for about 5 months, so a great opportunity there. It's the first time offered in 43 years, right alongside Elkington Park. It's 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, 2-car parking on 542 square metres of north-facing land. It's got a slipway, a boat shed. Mark Boas from our office has listed that property. It is fantastic. Make sure you reach out to him if you want an inspection. And we've got a host of other fantastic, amazing properties going for inspection, and also some going under the hammer this weekend. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you all next week.